The role of transport in sustainable development was first recognized in 1992 United Nations Earth Summit. Sustainable transport can accelerate progress towards other key objectives, combating climate change. Transport is responsible for around a quarter of direct CO2 emissions from fossil fuel combustion. Emissions from aviation and shipping as well have recently been growing faster than other models of transport. Aviation fuel consumption produces CO2 at a defined ratio 3.16 kilograms of CO2 per kilogram of fuel consumed, regardless of the phase of flight. In 2018, aviation accounted for 2.4% of total CO emissions worldwide. While this may seem like a relatively small amount, consider that if a global commercial aviation were a country in 2019, ranking of national greenhouse gas emissions, the sector would rank 6th in the world between Japan and Germany. In 1960, when air travel was an expensive mode of travel, 100 million passengers traveled by air. In 2019, the total annual number of passengers worldwide was 4.56 billion. In 2018, passengers air transport accounted for 81% of global commercial aviation emissions, and air cargo accounted for the remaining 19%. Both categories have experienced steady growth, and this trend will continue. By 2050, emissions from commercial aviation could triple given the projected growth in passenger and freight aviation. Passenger air transport caused the highest and fastest growth in individual emissions before the pandemic, despite significant improvements in aircraft and air transport efficiency over the last 60 years. And now to the impacts of the pandemic. According to an October 2021 report by the International Air Transport Association, global aviation fuel consumption in 2019 was just under 400 billion liters. In 2020, consumption fell by 45% as a result of the pandemic, and by 39% in 2021. According to the Federal Aviation and Space Administration's aerospace forecast from 2021 to 2041 report, there will be a repaired year-over-year growth from low levels in 2020 and 2021 to pre-pandemic levels in 2024, and then more typical growth from 2025 onward. Now I would like to talk about our first report, increasing greenhouse gas emissions from commercial aviation. This report examines the impact of the growth of air and cargo transportation on greenhouse gas emissions, with a focus on the United States. According to the International Council on Clean Transportation, global CO2 emissions from commercial air transport were 920 million metric tons in 2019. The United States, which has the largest commercial air transport system in the whole world, accounts for 23% of the total. Transportation emissions in the United States are made up of 10% commercial and business aircraft, accounting for 3% of total US greenhouse gas emissions. This amount to 75 gallons of fuel per citizen in the US, compared, for example, to 32 gallons per citizen in Europe. The International Civil Aviation Organization has defined the regulations to be followed by US airlines. These standards specify that aircraft certified after 1st of January 2020 for commercial jets and after 1st of January 2023 for business jets will require an average 4% reduction in cruise fuel consumption compared to the performance of new aircraft delivered in 2015. Between 1970 and 2019, technological advances in engine technology and design improvements in air travel operations, designer seating configuration have reduced the energy intensity of air travel expressed in British thermal units per mile of travel by 77% in the United States.
This report mainly discusses the EU initiative titled the Refuel EU Aviation Initiative, which targets the aviation industry as a result of their current gas emissions and the high amount of pollution that the aviation industry currently incurs. So, as you all may know, currently we're going through a climatic crisis, and the EU has taken actions to mitigate the bloc's greenhouse emissions. Therefore, they adopted the European climate law, where all emissions must be reduced by at least 55% compared to 1990 levels. So as a result, in September 22, the European Parliament and Council met in order to propose the use of more sustainable aviation fuels within the aviation industry in the European Union and penalties as a result of non-compliance. The amount of sustainable fuels would gradually be increased from 2% in 2025 to upwards of 63% in 2053, and the European Council and Parliament are both negotiating a gradual timeline of percentages that will be increased, and as well as the penalties that will be given as a result of non-compliance. However, the cost of using sustainable fuels would obviously be quite significant to low-cost airlines such as Ryanair and EasyJet, and Wizz Air, who would obviously have to incur more costs as a result of new infrastructure and the operational and managerial cost to make sure that all relevant EU laws are being followed, and fuel providers will have to look for new providers and change their formulas to more eco-friendly solutions, thereby increasing costs.
One leading country regarding sustainable policies in Europe is Sweden. This report from 2021 shows the strategy for 2045 and talks about the turning point in 2017. The main issue for the green aviation in Sweden is to face the paradoxical situation of the rebound effect. According to Statista, Swedish passengers represent only 0.8% of the global passengers. And it also follows a trend, the increasing number of passengers by 8% in Europe in 2017. However, after 2017, we saw an increase of the flight scam, which is the shame to take plane and to prefer train or cars. Hence, the paradox here is that the Swedish government is willing to push the green aviation, but it may reduce the flight scam and lead to a CO2 increase as the plane is not zero emission yet. So, in order to resolve this paradox, the Swedish government chose an active leadership to resolve the issue by proposing EU-wide policy making, such as the refuel policy, and also sustainable infrastructures. More about HRM, they proposed to create a platform in order to share and collaborate with other R&D structure in other industry or companies, but also with other country in order to share the knowledges and to go faster toward the goal of 2045.
This report is about two-stage data-driven analysis, and the aim is to find out which sustainable development alternatives are most likely to succeed. So according to the results, the most important factors for sustainable aviation logistics were weight, conversion, and fuel efficiency. So weight was found out to be the most influential on sustainable aviation logistics. For example, UPS upgraded its cockpit display system with new equipment weighing 80 pounds less than the old one, which can effectively reduce carbon emissions and fuel consumption. Conversion, for example, Heathrow Airport was converting its ground transportation system to electrical power for reducing pollution. And the last, fuel efficiency. So, for example, GE Aviation also enhanced fuel efficiency by introducing aircraft equipment with a new generation of turbine engines.
The main sustainable human resource management needed to address the climatic challenge is the common good human resource management, which involves a fundamental change in the purpose of business to resolve current sustainability challenges that exist. And within this human resource management, the aviation industry's challenges have been addressed using innovations and incentives to both people and the companies. Managers within the system need to invest in leadership development programs that focus on sustainability to make this human resource management system work.
One way in which HRM can support green aviation is by ensuring that employees are properly trained in sustainable practices. HRM can also play a role in developing and implementing sustainability policies and procedures that support green aviation. Effective leadership is essential for driving sustainable change in the aviation industry, so leaders can set an example by promoting sustainable practices and encouraging employees to adopt green behaviors. They can also create a culture of sustainability within their organizations by prioritizing sustainable practices in their decision making. Leaders can drive progress towards SDG 9 by setting ambitious sustainability targets and ensuring that their organizations are committed to achieving them. They can also collaborate with other stakeholders, such as government agencies, to promote sustainable air transportation and develop innovative solutions to sustainability challenges. By demonstrating a strong commitment to sustainability, leaders can inspire employees and stakeholders to support sustainable air transportation and work towards a more sustainable future. So, something about sustainable air transport solutions. First, some background. Prior to the pandemic, aviation accounted for 2% of global greenhouse gas emissions, and these were growing by around 4% per year. As for the reducing the carbon footprint of aviation, low emissions technologies and fuels have not yet entered the marketplace, but for short-haul flights, may be electrification the preferred option. Well, long-haul aviation requires high energy density fuels, and currently there is no commercially viable substitute for kerosene jet fuel, though some airlines have begun mixing it with biofuels. Besides these low or zero carbon fuel options, there are other ways of reducing the carbon footprint of aviation, including demand reduction, increasing logistical and operational efficiency, and modal shifts to less carbon-intensive forms of transport. However, modal shifts need to also consider any additional social and environmental impacts in the local context. International Civil Aviation Organization is the industry's global standard-setting body. In 2019, at their 40th session, they repeated 2 global aspirational goals for the international aviation sector. You can see them on the board. ICAO is also exploring the feasibility of a long-term global aspirational goal for international aviation. And in order to achieve these goals and to promote sustainable growth of international aviation, is ICAO pursuing measures including aircraft technology improvements, operational improvements, sustainable aviation fuels, and market-based measures. Major airlines have also recently announced the setting of targets to become climate neutral. However, many of these commitments appear to hinge on carbon offsets, which can be of uneven quality or pose challenges in terms of certification and credibility. Well, in the long term, a switch to alternative fuels and electric airplanes would appear to be essential.